the final piece of the puzzle, as they say, Brian, when talking about linebackers and breaking down the position group, is the breakouts. Who has an opportunity to be a breakout player at the linebacker position? Lots of new faces, lots of new positions. As you mentioned at the top, no returning starters at linebacker in the position that they are playing. So who could break out from this group? It could be a long list. It could be a short list, depending on how you look at it. Whoever's leading the team in tackles is going to be a new person leading the team in tackles. And so, who is that breakout star going to be? And as a reminder to those who may be joining us for the first time, first of all, welcome. But when we talk about breakouts, there's a couple of different levels of breakout, right? We have the didn't play at all is going to break out into a rotational type of player. You've got a rotational type of player that's going to break out into a really, really good starter. And then you've got a breakout player that maybe was a starter and then could break out into a national star type of person. And then, of course, you could always leapfrog one to the next or, skip a spot or whatever. But those are kind of the levels that we talk about when we're talking about breakouts, Brian.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw a caveat in here and a little asterisk for linebackers, because part of the breakout, the first part of the breakout you talked about, to me, is also special teams.
Oh, okay. I like that.
And so I'm going to go with that one too. But let's talk about guys that can end up becoming like impact players. Jack Kaiser's the first one that I look at and say this is a guy that's got a chance to be a breakout player. Production-wise, sure. I don't think Jack Kaiser becoming a breakout player on the field is going to shock a lot of people nationally, because he actually gets a lot of love. I mean, he's ranked by some as a top 10 linebacker in the country. I actually think.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
wow.
I actually think Lindy's had him. Yeah, Lindy's has him as the number 7 outside linebacker, returning linebacker in the country.
No kidding.
Well, I mean, again, he's played a ton of football. He's made a lot of tackles. Yeah. I mean, he tied for the team lead in solo tackles last year with J.D. Bertrand.
This is true, with a lot less snaps.
This is some kid that's never played before, and I think there's just an assumption that he's going to move inside and be fine, and I hope that they're right on that. So
me too.
The perception is going to be there, but the production is the breakout that I see from Jack Kaiser. If Jack is as good as I hope he can be this year,
sure,
I think he's going to have the best will numbers we've seen since JD back in 2021. And if you remember that season, that was the first year under Marcus Freeman. That was quite an interesting offseason when we talk about, people not freaking out when guys get hurt. If you remember correctly, Maris Leofau was the star of the offseason that year. He was going to be a stud. He had a great spring, super high expectations. He goes down. Shane Simon was having a horrible fall camp. He's struggling. And who emerges from that group that nobody really expected? J.D. Bertrand. And J.D. goes out that year playing in Marcus Freeman's defense, has 101 total tackles, 63 solo tackles, which was the most Notre Dame had since Tavon Coney had 63 in 2018. And before that, Jaylen Sneed had 69 in 2015. Jaylen had 64 in 2014. Manti had 55 in 2012, and Manti had 62 in 2011. Manti had 64 in 2010, 66 by Kyle McCarthy in 2009. So J.D. Bertrand's one season at will linebacker was very productive.
Yeah.
Very productive. And he had 7 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. I think I don't know that Jack is going to get to 101 tackles. I don't think he's going to play enough to get to 101 tackles. That team was involved in way too many close games that year where your linebackers had to play 4 games. I think there's going to be a lot of the, Jack's out by the third quarter type of games this year. What I think is going to happen, though, is a big jump in the disruptive production. I think Jack's going to be more maybe not – he's not going to be as good as, maybe Maris that's delivering some of the highlight reel plays. But I think Jack's going to get to the football a lot more than Maris did last year, a lot more consistently.
Oh, yes.
So we should see 8, 9, 10 tackles for loss this season from him. Because, again, we're not talking about him replacing JD's production last year of 7 tackles for loss. We're talking about can he replace Maris's production from last year? Maris had 44 tackles, 6 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. If Jack Kaiser doesn't go way past, if Jack Kaiser's not at least 60 to 70 tackles next year, 7, 8 tackles for loss this year, I'll be shocked. Shocked. So I think, and then of course with that comes even more recognition from an
accolades, certain accolades. Yeah. He's got such a nose for the football, Brian, that I just don't see how he's not around it at all times. It's just,
right.
And I know that he's probably going to end up splitting some reps here and there, and maybe he's not going to be on the field as much. And I get all that, and I totally understand it. But man, when he's on the field, when we look back on this season and we do the per snap production and all of that, like we do with him now, it's still going to be very, very good. I don't know that it's going to be as good as it was because the volume of snaps is obviously going to go way up,
and they're going to rotate a lot more
for sure.
And I think they did last year as well.
His nose for the football is just so good. I mean, his instincts are just so good. And now you're going to place him a little bit closer to the football as well, being on the inside. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I'm excited to see what Jack Kaiser can do in this linebacker room with these other guys around him as well. He's going to be a focus of the defense to a degree at the second level. There's no doubt about it. But how do you not focus on a guy like Drake Bowen? How do you not focus on some other guys as well? You know what I mean?
Forget Drake Bowen. You got to deal with Howard Cross and Riley Mills first before you got to worry about Jack Kaiser.
And that's
what we were talking about the other day, yesterday when we were having the D-line conversation, Vince, is the better those guys are, the more you can't. I mean, by the time you get off to Jack, he's already at you. And if he's at you by the time you get off a block, you're done. You're
good luck.
Toast.
Right.
And so I do believe Jack's going to have a breakout in that regard. Again, is he going to put up like Jaylen Smith type numbers, Tavon Coney type numbers, 100+ tackles, 10+ tackles for loss? No, I don't think he's going to do that for a host of reasons. Different defensive system.
Sure.
Rotating more blowouts, things like that. But I think he's going to have a very disruptive season for Notre Dame. I do.
So who's the next guy that is on your list? I'm curious to see if we match up here.
I mean, we could really go the whole group. I've got really 4 guys that are going to be breakouts to some degree. 5 guys are going to be breakouts to some degree. 4 linebacker, 1 somewhere else. My next guy is, I think, Drake Bowen.
Yep,
and it's hilarious. The takes on Drake Bowen are – it's like last year – a lot of the people in the chat were like, he needs to play over JD Bertrand and blah, blah, blah. And I remember how pissed I was when they didn't start Drake against Central Michigan. Remember that? Like, I thought that was, I still think that was a mistake. But now a lot of those same people are ready to say bench Drake and play Kingston. And so it's funny within the fan base of people who just think the Drake Bowen's just not going to play this year. But I also think there's been an unhealthy pushback against Kingston. Like, some people are taking out on Kingston frustrations they have with what fans are saying about Kingston. And I think that's just as unfair as saying we're ready to write off Drake Bowen. So I'm going to go here. I think they're both going to be breakout players for Notre Dame this year. I think Drake's going to be the starter. I think Drake's going to be a pretty good football player. I think he's going to be very disruptive. He's going to deliver some punishing hits. He's going to make his fair share of mistakes. But he's going to be a very disruptive player as well, in my opinion. He's going to add a lot more physicality to the run game than what they've had at Mike in recent seasons. JD was a really good run player because he was smart and fast, and he could beat you to the point of attack. Drake's going to be able to play with a little bit more of the ferocity that you need from a Mike linebacker. But you're also going to see a lot of Kingston. And the thing I love about what Notre Dame is doing is, Kingston's playing a lot of Mike, but that's not the only position he's playing. He's going to also be playing a lot of Will and doing a lot of different things as well. So I think they're both going to be breakouts. I think they're both going to be guys that have a chance to come out this season and be playmakers for this defense. And at times it's going to be Kingston spelling Drake. And at times I do think, again, this is a total projection. I think they're going to be snaps where we see Kingston and Drake on the field together.
I think that's
especially against some of the teams that like to run the football a lot.
Sure. And I think that could potentially be a preview of 2025.
Potentially. I think Jaylen Sneed might have a little something to say about that. But
and I hope he does. You know what? The more competition, the better.
But it's saying about competition, sure, but it's also about like some of the best linebacking corps Notre Dame has had in recent years. You had 3 guys that played a bunch. I mean, in 2017, your top 4 tacklers were all linebackers. You remember that? Because in 2017, you had Drew was your rover. He finished 3rd in tackles. Niles was your starting Mike. He had 92 tackles. Greer started half the games at will. He had 75 tackles. Tavon Coney started some at will and played some at Mike. He was the sort of the do-it-all guy.
Yeah.
And he had 116 tackles. He had 4 linebackers with 75 or more tackles on that team.
That's crazy.
In 2017. Because 4 guys played a ton of football.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the future of the position with the depth they have now. Like,
sure.
If they have Anthony Sacca committed in the 2025 class. They're hoping to land Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Usu-Boateng. Guess what? When those guys get to campus, there's going to be people in the chat. They need to bench Kingston and play.
Oh yeah.
But the reality is that's a good thing because it's showing how well Notre Dame is recruiting.
Sure.
That people are like already ready to dismiss this freshman All-American because this guy is a stud too. And when you have that as a coach, it's like, okay, play them all. Find a room for, find a role for all of them. And that's going to be the task in front of Maris Leofow, or not Maris Leofow, but in front of Max Bulla and Al Golden this year, is how can you use all of them?
Sure.
That's going to be the key. And when I look at Drake, I think he's going to be a breakout. There's not a lot of people nationally talking about Drake. And I think that's going to change a little bit. And there are a lot of people talking about Kingston, and I think he's going to answer that bell and go from a guy that's, never played it down to a very important player for Notre Dame. So I have them both. I have them both as breakouts this season.
I love that.
I was going to go Jaylen Sneed as well, and I think it's certainly possible, very, very possible. With him, I just need to see it a little bit.
I'm not ready to go that route yet.
But it won't shock me.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to predict it.
Yeah, right.
But I'm anticipating it, if that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense, Vince. I think it can. He's looked great so far. But
sure.
Because he's a junior and we've seen some of the things from him, it's probably not right. But I'm giving Drake and Kingston a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt because they're just more instinctive players than what Jaylen has shown.
Sure.
But I also can't deny what I've seen with my own eyes in practice, Vince.
Yeah.
And it's like we talked about this, you and I, off the air last year in fall camp when we're talking about Maris. Like, I'm not going to talk about it on the show today, but dang, he looked good today.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about Jaylen so far. It's like, I don't want to talk about him in the show because we've been here, done that, but dang, he looked good today. So I'm not ready to predict it, but I'm anticipating it.
You're getting
there. That could certainly happen, especially as a pass rusher. Like that's where I think Jaylen could have a really big breakout this year. Is maybe he doesn't play as much as an off-ball linebacker, but I think he's going to be a force to be reckoned with in some of their sub packages.
Okay,
just because he's so twitchy and he's just got he's shown a much better knack for winning in fall camp this year and in the spring than he did last year. Winning meaning timing up blitzes, beating linemen around the block, getting off blocks, and just winning reps. We've seen a lot more of that.
I could get on board with that assessment more so than as a breakout player per se, right? I can definitely get on board with that because I think that's a great niche home for him where he could make a name for himself and where he could really help this team. Really help this team because I do think he's an instinctual pass rusher when you're just giving him that responsibility. Could he play will and be effective at will and be an off-the-ball linebacker and all of those things? Sure, he could, for sure. What I see as the more plausible possibility right now with just what I've seen from him over the last 2.5 years would be more of the package, pass rush type of role. I could definitely see that for him. And look, that's a really important piece to what this defense is going to be moving forward in 24. You need that. I think that would be a crucial part of this defense. He just wouldn't be, an every down linebacker. And that's okay. If you can find your niche and you can be really, really good at it, he could be that guy. And I think that could be a huge part to this team. I think that's a really good point because I wasn't ready. I was going to push back on you if you were going to name him as like a breakout player.
Well, because then you're just like, dude, you literally named the entire 2 defense side as breakout players.
Yeah, right. For sure.
I wanted to go with Jaden Ausberry, but again, I haven't seen him take a rep out at in fall camp in a team setting yet. Or not many. You know what I mean? We saw the first day with no pads on. I just need to see a little bit more from Jaden than the other guys, but it wouldn't shock me if he has a breakout. Like literally all of them can be breakouts. That's how talented the room is.
That's true.
But I'm just not ready to go there. My final breakout is actually Preston Zinner.
Oh, interesting.
because I think Preston Zinner is going to end up being a breakout player on special teams this year.
Okay.
This is my one guy that I said I'm adding a little bit of an asterisk to the linebacker position because of how much they're going to be used on special teams. I don't have reason for it. We haven't seen him in practice. This is just some things I've heard, but also just my feeling of the kind of player he is. It won't shock me if Preston Zinner becomes sort of like the Jordan Patelho of special teams.
Okay.
Remember how impactful Jordan was in 2022? I mean, he had a couple block kicks. He had the fumble recovery or the block kick recovery against Syracuse at like the 1 yard line. He's the one that actually blocked the punt that Maris scooped, or not Maris, but Prince Colley scooped and scored against Clemson.
Right.
Then he was on some blocking teams, where he was part of the coverage team or the return team and things along those lines. I could see Preston Zinner becoming that guy.
Okay.
He's 6'3", he's 240. He's a good at. In a lot of other years, Preston Zinner is a guy that you're talking about as like, maybe he's in the 2 deep or battling for starting job of linebacker. He just so happens to be a talented kid that's buried at an incredibly talented position group. That's the problem. But the great thing about linebacker that's different at quarterback and even running back to a degree is there's so many things you can do with that kind of guy that has nothing to do with defense. Kickoff team, kick return team, punt block team, punt cover team, punt return team. There's, PAT field goal. Onside kick. There's so many different ways you can use a guy.
Sure.
Like that. And Preston was a pretty good tight end in high school too. So like maybe he's the up back and he's a guy that you can take a punt. He's athletic enough to do it.
Sure.
He's one of those kids that if it wasn't for the talent that's there with him, we'd be having a different conversation about this kid. Like this kid going into 2019, 2020, this kid, if he was on the team in 2020 as a sophomore, he'd have beat out Shane Simon easily as a starting will linebacker. That was on a playoff team, Vince.
Yeah. Yes, it was.
But he just happens to be at Notre Dame at a time where they're loaded at that position. And it's unfortunate for him as a linebacker, but
Sure.
It's also very fortunate for Marty Biaggi. So as long as Preston has the right attitude going into fall camp, I'll be shocked if Preston Zinner's not a breakout player on special teams this year and make some kind of splash, big block. You're going to
Sure.
go back. Oh, did you see that long return from Jaden Harrison? Did you see the block that Preston Zinner had and he cut right off of him for a touchdown? Those type of things. I that's what I see from that big block kick and that kicked the game off against Florida State that got that game wrong. Like that's the kind of stuff that I think you're going to see Preston Zinner have an impact on this year. And that's why he's my breakout player, because I do think he's going to have a breakout. It's just not going to be on defense. It's going to be on special teams. But it's also the point now where it's like you could have a couple injuries, and if you're forced to put Preston Zinner on the field of linebacker, you're like, okay. All right, okay. Like think about this. Your whole starting linebacking core comes down with the flu, right? It's like that scene from My Cousin Vinny. The whole store gets the flu. You bleed at, the whole store gets the flu. When he had that stupid jacket on. I put on this ridiculous thing for you. But anyway, the whole starting linebacking core gets the flu, can't play. Okay? No Jack Kaiser, no Drake Bowen, no Jaylen Sneed. Your starting defense at that time would be Jaden Alsbury, theoretically, Jaden Alsbury, Kingston Viliama-Asa, and Preston Zinner. It's a pretty good freaking linebacking core.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I'd be okay with that in most of their games.
Right.
You know what I mean?
I'd kind of be okay with like almost all their games.
Okay. All right.
Like that's a really good group. It's young.
Very.
Super young.
Very.
And that's the concern. But talent-wise, you're like, dude, those are pretty good flipping players. And they would be bigger than the starting lineup. Think about it. Because Kingston's every bit as big as Drake. And then you'd have Preston at 6'3", 235, replacing 6'1", 230 Jack Kaiser. So you look at it and like that just speaks volumes about how loaded this group is. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this group play.
Yeah. Oh, that would be an understatement. I'm very much looking forward to seeing this group play. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. But this is going to be a fun and exciting linebacking core to keep an eye on this year. There's going to be highlight reel plays that are going to be made, and you just hope that some of those other plays are few and far between. And that's the hope of this group moving forward. And again, the athleticism, the speed, the length of this group, it's going to be fun to watch, folks. It's going to be fun to watch. So stay tuned. for
Yep.
sure.
And we have a couple super chats, Vince.
Oh,
Before we
sweet.
get out of here, I wanted to have you answer.
Oh,
super
yeah,
chat
this one.
from Beefeater. We had another one from Carson Jackson, but
Okay.
Beefeater says, Vince, with your unique view on the kicking world, what are the more subtle advantages of a punter with a 5-second hang time versus the NFL average of 4.4 seconds? Can we just say something real quick?
Go for it.
James Rendell's not going to average
Not a chance
for punt. I mean, it's just not good.
Well, and he's not going to be asked to have 5 seconds of hang time for all of his punts,
It's
right?
just like you don't ask a guy to do something that you can't do. That's just not going to happen.
Right, exactly. So what is the advantage of a 5-second hang? It's to allow your coverage team to get down there and there's no return. I mean, that's the advantage. I mean, that the longer the ball is in the air, the more of an opportunity you have to get your coverage unit down to cover the punt. Right. And so you're going to see a lot more fair catches and things of that nature. And I will also say the spin on his ball that I was able to see on some of the video is just weird. Like I've never seen that before. And I have seen probably thousands of punters at this point in my life. And I have never seen that type of a spin where it kind of moves the ball sideways.
So I have a question for you. Some people in the chat have said that has to do with how rugby basically is played. That's Australian rules football is rugby, correct?
Okay, yeah.
What we call rugby.
Yeah, and I think
they kick the ball there.
Yeah.
It's you're kicking it way differently than you are as a punter. So
it's a different shaped ball, and yeah. So
would that kind of maybe explain partly
possibly
why?
Yeah, possibly.
Is he super long? I'd be very curious about that.
I would actually love to just sit down and have a conversation. What I would love to do, like my kid studies punting, like more so than he studies some of the things he should be studying, but he studies punting. I would love to hear those two like have a conversation about how you hold the ball, how you step it off, all of the different little intricacies that are involved in punting, and find out what the differences are from what my son does, which is more traditional, right? As to what James Rendell does, and to get that kind of a spin on the ball. And so I would be absolutely fascinated to watch that conversation take place. And frankly, I'm fascinated to see him actually kick a ball. He was actually kicking today, but he was on a different field behind a fence. And so I kept seeing the ball go up and go down, but not him actually kicking it. So
people said Aussie rules football and rugby are different.
I don't know.
They say that Aussie rules football is kind of in between the two. So I guess I don't know.
Okay.
Never watched it.
I know there's like sevens.
It was kind of like my assumption was that it was like what they call football in Europe is soccer. I just thought when they said Aussie rules football, since Australians are supposedly really good at rugby, that's what it was. But it's supposedly different. But the ball definitely comes off very differently. But it's very powerful.
Absolutely.
Like I don't know if you noticed some of the hang time, like some of the arch, not hang time, but the arch he was getting on some of those kicks. Like normally punters, you don't really see it from where we were today. You don't see their ball. But his you could see from practice.
Yeah, and I will also say that the hang time was very, very good on the balls that I saw go up. The distance wasn't fantastic. So it just depends on what you're asking your punter to do. Is he backed up at his own goal line and you just want to get a bunch of distance? Right. Or is it are you on your own 35 and you want to get some height and just coffin kick it?
Which I thought I remembered them kicking left to right. From what we were looking out is what I thought I saw.
The couple balls I saw went from right to left.
Right to left.
So I mean,
my question is, since they were working on red zone, were they working on kicking in your own territory? That's the other thing that you
absolutely,
think of, right?
Yeah,
like
100%.
So it's very different. But here's an example. Last year, Bryce McPherson ranked. Well, he didn't rank anywhere when it came to punting because he didn't punt enough.
Which is the offense,
right? So he had 38 punts. He didn't qualify for the national ranking. But if he did, 45.1. I believe I did this ranking. He would have been
really good.
This is gross average. He would have been ranked 19th in the country.
Okay,
it's pretty good. Right?
Yep.
Just didn't have enough kicks. The problem is Notre Dame last year ranked 96th in the country in punt returns against. It's just not
coverage.
Good.
So coverage,
correct. Now, part of that is, they made some mistakes in coverage, but the other part of it is, since they didn't have a lot of opportunities, that one long one from USC kind of inflated the numbers a little bit. The third part of that is Bryce McPherson was not good at kicking where they wanted the ball to go.
Right. Exactly.
He would kick it far, but it'd get up and down real fast.
Right.
And then the guys are catching it and they got room to run. And sometimes they don't only get 7-8 yards, but that's 7-8 yards. That can be a difference, right? If I catch it at the 11 and I run 9 yards of the 20, I feel a lot better as an offensive coordinator than if you catch it at the 11 and you're pinned at the 11.
100%.
I just feel better about that. I don't have as much, much room. So,
and that's the thing about punting that I keep trying to explain to people when they're all excited about the leg of James Rendell, which is great. It's great. That's a great thing to have, but you have to be able to put it where the coach wants you to put it. You've got to be able, and that's where the hang time comes in potentially. That's where, you see guys when they drop the ball, it's up and down, and then you get that backspin. Like, that's a way to kick a ball that's very important. So, I mean, there's different ways to do it where you want to be able to put it where you want to put it. And too many times the ball wasn't going where they wanted it, when they wanted it to get there, which is why they were okay with him hitting the portal. So, he had a big leg. He's always had a big leg. Bryce McPherson has a huge leg. There's no doubt, but it didn't always go where they wanted it to go. And sometimes
kind of a big deal.
Yeah. It's a huge deal.
It's kind of like having a place kicker that can kick a 60-yard field goal, but misses chip shots from 36, right? Like, which one would you rather have?
Exactly.
Right? I want the guy that's money from inside of 45.
100%.
Right? There's only going to be like one time a year where I'd rather have the other guy. Honestly.
Right. Yep. No doubt about it.
So
no doubt about it. So
we had one more super chat that I want to get to as well. This is related to linebackers.
Carson Jackson, thank you so much for the super chat. Could Sneed be a Harold Perkins-ish kind of guy? Oh, I got it. Harold Perkins-ish kind of guy.
Yep. Look, is he as good as Harold Perkins? Is he as dynamic as Harold Perkins? I mean, he hasn't shown that. They're very similar bodies. I think Harold's thicker, but they're very similar bodies. They're both really twitchy, athletic players. I think Harold is a more instinctive player than what Jaylen has shown himself to be at Notre Dame. But Harold Perkins is kind of like a rover body that whose game is kind of best suited to rush off the edge. I mean, that's kind of what he does best is rush the passer, but he doesn't have the body to be a pass rusher.
Right.
So, like in the Notre Dame defense, would he be like that situational pass rusher that would be really dynamic? Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Would he also be a part of your will conversation and be a disruptive downhill blitzer, good coverage player? Sure. Yeah, he would. And you hope that Jaylen Sneed can do a lot of those things. So, yes, you are going to be asking him to do a lot of the things for your defense that LSU asks Harold Perkins to do in his defense. Just probably not as much just line up on the edge and rush the quarterback, but being that situational nickel, get after the quarterback kind of guy. Yes, I absolutely believe that's what Notre Dame is going to ask Jaylen Sneed to do some of this season. Like, it just won't be as, like I said, it won't be as much of, you're going to see Jaylen Sneed rushing the quarterback off the edge. You're also going to see Jaylen Sneed rushing in between the tackles.
Oh, sure.
But yeah, I mean, that's going to be similar to what you're asking Jaylen Sneed to do. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can play the position as well as Harold Perkins does, then Notre Dame's going to be pretty flipping good because he's a very good football player. He's an interesting guy because he's a heck of a pass rusher, but he's just not a big enough guy to be a full-time defensive end. He's just not even close,
right?
Or even full-time stand-up outside linebacker. And he's got a lot to learn as an inside linebacker, which is partly why I think Harold Perkins is going to be really good this year. If they leave him as an off-ball linebacker, I think he's going to be really good because now he's got a more of a year of kind of getting after the quarterback, but also being used as an off-ball linebacker, which they didn't ask him to do a ton as a freshman. Like as a freshman, he was a super disruptive guy that just got after the football. I mean, he didn't play as much off-ball linebacker as he did the year before. But now you look at him and say, okay, now you're asking him to do a lot more last year.
Sure.
And he was good, but he was not maybe as good as maybe people thought he was going to be last season, but still not as good as people thought he was going to be. 75 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 5.5 sacks is pretty flipping good. But again, he had less production than he did as a freshman. As a freshman, he had 73 tackles, 14 tackles for loss, and 8.5 sacks because he was playing more off-ball linebacker. This year, I think they're going to ask him to do that even more, but still utilizing his ability to rush quarterback.
Right.
So role-wise, body type-wise, athleticism-wise, sure, there's a lot of things that Jaylen Sneed and Harold Perkins have in common. Both highly ranked recruits. Jaylen wasn't ranked as high as Harold was, if I recall. Let me just look up Harold Perkins' ranking. I thought I remembered Harold Perkins being like a top 10 kind of guy, where Jaylen was more of a top 50 kind of guy, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah, he was 12th, 5th, 4th, and 34th So, whereas I think Jaylen's highest ranking was 34th. So two people had Harold Perkins in the top 5. Another had him 12, and then somebody else had him 134th. Jaylen was ranked 26th, 42nd, 48th, and 46th coming out of high school. So, yeah. So, yes, the long way of answering your question. Yeah, I think so. But I just don't want to say, oh, yeah, definitely. And then people think, like, so you think Jaylen Sneed could have 14 tackles for loss and 8 sacks this year? No, I'm not saying that. I hope he does.
That'd be great.
But I don't think he's going to play enough to do that because they're going to play a rotation. But I don't know that he's quite the player that Harold Perkins is, or at least hasn't shown himself to be so. Because if he was that kind of player, he'd have found a role by now, like more extensive than he was. Big thing for Jaylen Sneed is I've just always felt that Jaylen went in his first 2 years with a little bit of a sense of entitlement, that I was a big-time recruit, therefore I should get this.
Sure.
One of the things that I have been told about Jaylen Sneed, I won't say that, but I'll say it. Yeah, I'll flat out say it. There was a time this offseason where it was assumed he wasn't going to be part of the team anymore. He was going to go in the portal. My understanding is through conversations with the staff that Jaylen sort of kind of realized, like, you know what? I don't know that I have been the best version of myself. And you see it, Vince. You saw it this spring, and you're seeing it this fall. He's a different worker.
Yeah.
I mean, just his attitude, the tempo he plays at. This is just a different version of Jaylen Sneed. Now, I'm not ready to get too fired up about it because I need to see it continue.
Right.
But he's a different looking kid this summer or this fall, and it's not because he's gained 5 pounds or whatever. It's just he just carries himself differently. And if Jaylen Sneed develops the right attitude about going about his business every day, he could be a breakout player as a linebacker, not just a situational guy. I just need to see it. You know what I mean? But yes, the talent, like Jaylen Sneed's not a guy I look at and say, man, I had him as a top 50 player. I think I missed on the talent. I didn't miss on the talent. The talent's obvious. He's a top 50 caliber talent. It's just, does he have the instincts, the feel, the desire to learn,
right,
the technical parts of the game, the passion to learn and play with the nuance that you need? Those have always been questions with Jaylen Sneed. And if he can answer those favorably, there's no reason to think he can't end up being Notre Dame's best linebacker. I mean, he's got that ability. Vince, there's 5 guys at linebacker that I think, if certain things go right, could be their best linebacker. Jack Kaiser could be their best linebacker. Drake Bowen, Kingston, Jaylen Sneed, and Jaden Osbury. That's how talented this group is. Is that and it's not because you can say that, and it's like, it's because none of them are any good, and one of them may step up. This is because these are all really good football players.
Yeah.
I graded Jack Kaiser. I think was my lowest ranked recruit coming out of high school for me. I don't care what other people say. I give you guys that information so you know it. But for me, I believe Jack Kaiser was my lowest ranked recruit coming out of high school, and I had Jack. I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure I had Jack as a top 250 guy. I loved Jack. And I know, 1A football, I don't care.
Yeah.
Playing 1A, if you're a 4-5,
he played like everywhere.
I don't care who you are, where you play. That only impacts your numbers.
Yeah.
But Jack Kaiser would have dominated as a senior, whether he's playing 1A or what's the highest? 4A, 5A?
6.
6A? I don't care what level he was playing at. Jack Kaiser was one of the best players in the state of Indiana in 2019. I don't care anything else.
Right.
He was a stud that you said punted, returned punts, played free safety, played quarterback. I mean, he was a dude.
Yep.
He was my lowest ranked guy of the guys that we're talking about. I mean, Jaylen was a top 50 guy. Jaden Osbury is a top 50 guy. Kingston was a top 50 guy. I had Drake Bowen as a top 100 guy, but with a 5-star upside, just because with Drake, it was just about, he didn't really, play a lot of off-ball linebacker in his career. And actually, matter of fact, I'm wrong on that. I actually had Drake as a top 50 player as well. I thought I had him as a top 100 guy, but maybe it was after his monster senior year. Looks like I moved him up a little bit. But this is an incredibly talented room. Incredibly talented room. It just comes down to, can they put it all together? Because it's also a very young room.
Sure, exactly.
And Jaylen Sneed might be the biggest wild card on the roster on defense. I remember we were talking 2 years ago. Sean Davis and I were talking he was telling me about a recruit that was at practice, and they were saying, "What'd you see?" And he was like, "Man, it's number 3. They couldn't block this number 3. This is Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Notre Dame, and they're like, they couldn't block who's number 3? I don't know who number 3 is, but they couldn't block number 3." And Sean and I are like, "Number 3? Who the heck is number 3?" Like, oh, Jaylen Sneed.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so the talent's there, but it's just about, can you put it all together and
harness it and
compare him to Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa? The difference, to me, that's not a good comparison, because Jeremiah was a guy that you played as a pure rover in space. Jaylen's more of a box guy. He'll play some rover, but Jaylen's going to be doing his damage as a pass rusher, as an inside linebacker in the rotation, things like that. So it doesn't really matter what Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa did. Different player.
Right.
Very different skill set. So that's where you come down from. But like, Vince, would it shock you at the end of the year if you're like, Jaylen Sneed's their most disruptive playmaker at linebacker? It won't shock me. No. As a talent, it won't shock me at all. There's literally not a linebacker that's in the top 5 that we look at that I would look at and say, boy, I'm surprised that guy was their best guy. The 5 guys I just mentioned, none of them are going to surprise. Like, we talk about, like, it's so unfair that people want to just dismiss Drake and put in Kingston, but it's also like, but you kind of understand it because Kingston's really good. You know what I mean? It's like they could all be that guy. And if Jaylen Sneed breaks out, the thing that's different is his breakout will look way different than the other guys, because it's going to be more that means he's getting a lot of hits on the quarterback this season. And that could be a really fun thing to watch. Really fun thing to watch. And Vince's little because like I see it in your head, Vince. Like, I see what's going on in your eyes. I know you. Yeah. And your thing is, dude, I want to believe. I want to believe, but I just need to see it. Yeah. I get it. Because you see him out there running. You're like, that dude moves different than a lot of other people. But you've also seen all the mistakes and the out of positions and all that. So that's what happens. The more you play, the more mistakes we get to see you make, and the more we can judge you, right? Like, that's just the reality of football, man.
You're not wrong.
And so I get your hesitation, and I'm there with you. But at the end of the day, that's the thing, is we also have to be willing to admit that if the light goes on for Jaylen Sneed, right, it's going to be fun to watch, because he's different. I mean, not better, not worse, just different. Yeah, with how he plays the game than the other linebackers. They're more traditional linebackers. He's more of just a really athletic dude, and linebacker makes the most sense. Right. But it's going to be fun to watch. Very fun to watch, which is why I said he's a guy that I'm not ready to predict a breakout, but it wouldn't shock me, because he's got that kind of ability. So just wanted to make sure we talked about that. So that's a good super chat. And I thank you for that, Carson. Appreciate you.
Any other super chats, or is that good?
No, that's it, man.
Okay.
That's it.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody for hanging out with us. Really appreciate the attention. And we've got more coming your way, as we always do. And so make sure you stay tuned. Tonight, you've got IB Nation Sports Talk, and I'm sure they're going to be talking some offensive line. Sean had a chance to talk to Joe Rudolph and then some other offensive linemen as well. And so I'm sure he's going to have some audio and all of that to talk about tonight on IB Nation Sports Talk. And then tomorrow, Brian and I will be back, and it's buy, sell, hold day, I do believe. And so that's a fun day for us. But we were also
we'll talk a little secondary early.
I was just going to say that. Yep,
I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to mute myself again. So you go ahead.
That's fantastic. No, we're going to talk secondary, and then we're also going to do buy, sell, hold. And so it's going to be a fun little Wednesday. And so really looking forward to that. So make sure that you stay tuned with Irish Breakdown, because this is where you get your info. So make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. There's a chance of an impromptu show on Saturday. Just throwing it out there. There's a chance. Actually, it's probably going to happen, because there is an opportunity for us to do a show. And so we're probably going to do one. So, but you would never know unless you have that notification bell clicked. So make sure you go ahead and do that. And of course, share with your family and friends, and jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. That is where all the fun happens. And if you're not there, you're a square. That's all there is to it. So for Brian,
can't be insulting people like that. I mean, it's true, but you can't say that.
I don't know if it's like a 1950s insult. I don't even know if that's even legitimate or not.
Every 20-year-old's like, what did you just call me?
Exactly.
I don't even know. Should I be mad about that?
I know, exactly. So I don't even know if that even...
The older fans are like, what? You better hope I don't run into you at a tailgate.
That's right. Oh, man. So, hey, thanks for hanging out with us, guys. Really appreciate you. For Brian, I'm Vince, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast.